Day 24, ladies and gentlemen, of our 1000 Dawns journey. And as I pencil off yet another day gone by, it did happen earlier today, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, literally 1 minute past midnight is when it happened that I finally got paid off of my new job. And I did imagine that even though this was like the first month, that it wasn't going to be like anything to like write home about, and well, certainly it is. There is a little bit of a few things I wanted to say about it, and that this is something that is going to increase over the next coming months. Because if it doesn't, then here's what things look like at the present. Because in the brief moments I did have to think about, economic reforms and stuff like that to my personal way of living, let me explain to you exactly what sort of like expenses go towards what I get paid. Like, what do I actually spend my money on? And throughout this next month, you're probably going to be seeing testimonies, if you will, mostly from myself, because who on earth wants to talk about it right beside me? All of this about what exactly I spend my money on. So, let's get into that, shall we? I pay rent, and I pay for my phone. I pay for the remaining like 250 quid I have to pay off my PC. I have like a rolling a £50 a month contract with Adobe and stuff like that, so I can continue to use the software to make my videos and all the rest of it. I usually spend a little bit of money, on terms of like lunches and stuff like that. But that's also, but let me sort of give you an idea about what it sort of comes to. So monthly rent comes to about, well, just being able to live at home, £200 a month, which is luxury compared to what it is in the outside world. Don't get me wrong about that. Fuel in terms of like transport to get me to and from work, on average it's about £120 a month. Call it £30 a week for the difference that makes. Now when it comes to, again, things like lunches and stuff like that, the average I actually spend is about just in this last week has been about £42 just in the last week. And most of it is, you know what I mean? It comes to just less than, let's say, less than about £7 a day on average. And considering that 3 days of that week I don't go to work at all, well, I'm off work, I should say, then you can throw that into account for what it's worth. But I did a small calculation on my way to work, and if things continue the way as they are, and this is what I'm expected to get paid, taking everything as a whole, then the amount I can actually take away and call my own, that I can actually put towards any sort of savings whatsoever, the total of which, unless there's a further reduction or unless there is something else that does need to be paid for, it amounts to, or almost slightly less than £30 a week. And this £30, ladies and gentlemen, a week is offset in many other cases by short-term things that I do need to stock myself on. For example, there is always shortages of things that are always going round, like a shortage on things like toothpaste or roll-on deodorant. And just little things here and there, like being able to afford like my Microsoft and stuff like that, using Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Considering that I use those programs on a daily basis anyway, it certainly makes sense to keep them going, because guess what? If you use them, if you pay for them, you may as well use them. That's the way it is. But what I have to do, ladies and gentlemen, and this is something that always sets in the mind of any frugal working man, is that I think what we should focus our minds on, ladies and gentlemen, is that can we in some way turn £30 into something greater? So What I have to do, ladies and gentlemen, is somehow turn for like a month, because of, again, monthly savings calculated at this sort of rate is about £120. I think in terms of to test the waters a little bit, we need to find a way to increase this to about £150 a month, aka having to make an extra 10 quid a week, because as things currently stand, even just filling up my car, robs me of a day's pay in just in 1 month. So that's already a day's work pretty much for nothing, just to get me to and from work. Then, of course, there's the other things when it comes to things like food and stuff like that. Let's say starting next week, I spend, let's say, £35 throughout that entire week just on Scran for food, for work and stuff like that. That's still, like, what is that? £140 in a month? That's still another day. I'm literally work almost a day and a half for working for nothing. In fact, throw that on top of fuel and stuff like that. That's 3 days out of basically what I can only describe as sort of like a 20-day working month, because calculated that I only do 4 days a week until like I'm beyond a certain period in which I can request to do 40 hours a week, then yeah, that's almost it's almost a fifth of the month just gone by that I'm literally spending on things before I even see a penny. So, I mean, there's plans, ladies and gentlemen, that we're trying to get a car that's even slightly more economical, which may or may not be much better for all parties involved in the months to come. But then, of course, you have to remind yourself about just other little things. And whilst I do argue very strongly, ladies and gentlemen, that, you know what, making money should be at the forefront of, not just succeeding, but even just surviving, although you can't really put it in dire straits like that, because we're not in dire straits. But I am sort of understanding what the cost is to be paid at the swindle wage. I don't call it a minimum wage, because a minimum wage is basically a swindle, in my opinion. So therefore, it's so whilst we are working towards getting off the swindle wage in terms of not just what we can make for ourselves, but also what we can make professionally. If I go, because there is a very clear route to climbing in the line of work that I'm in. So if it's a matter of just cracking on and being promoted and stuff like that, so much the better. But that doesn't mean I can't make money elsewhere, doing like what I do online and stuff like that. It may seem like a bit of an odd way to put it, but because I'm so like surrounded by dealing with money all day long, there is always a mistake to believe that it's easy to get it as the way you see other people do it. It's not nearly as easy as it looks. But what I am prepared to say is that it's not without trying. They say there is nothing easier to make in this world than money, but the sort of people who say that are usually the ones who are almost at the very top of the tree, and will either literally drop a match to the very bottom or pull the ladder up, Jack, and sod the rest. We're not really with anywhere near that category of people right now. What I can say, however, is that we have pretty much got our loins wrapped right round this tree. And before you know where you are, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting to climb it. But it's not going to be easy. There will be times where trying to climb up this tree or come down off this wall, as I've explained in a few different shorts over the last couple of weeks, climbing up this tree, even though there is a clear route, it's not always that easy. And I know, because I've had to succeed at things that at first appeared extremely difficult. But this is sort of how it is, ladies and gentlemen. We now understand exactly what we are being rewarded at the moment for being at the absolute bottom tier. So there is only one way up from here, and we now understand exactly, well, if we're going to do it, then ignoring everything else that's around us, we have to stay focused on the right here and now. And I will literally spend my money on literally nothing else except what I need, and that's it. I've somehow got to make the very tough choice, ladies and gentlemen, to prioritize necessities over wants. Always a difficult point of contention for what I'm actually being paid. Because I will say this, I have worked previous jobs where I've been paid an awful lot more for doing a lot more hours, for doing not necessarily any difficult work, and I think I'll probably have undergone a lot less humiliation for what I'm doing at the moment. Regardless, if in 6 months' time and I literally throw in the towel, I would have just literally have taken all this abuse and all this stick for nothing. But what we got to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is that the ball is finally within our court at last. It is time to fight back. And it starts by climbing up this tree.